Good evening and welcome to The Chanel Show. Tonight we continue our coverage of COP26, which concludes today after almost a fortnight of high-level meetings and negotiations. Our leaders were in full force in recognition of the dire stakes at hand and directed the truth boldly at those who needed to hear it the most. Speaking directly to former US President Barack Obama, our Prime Minister, who served as the president of COP23 and co-chair of the first UN Conference of Oceans, noted that the United States and other developed nations failed to meet a 2020 deadline for offering $100 billion a year in promised funding for those countries.
Thank you, and good morning to you all. Good morning, Mr. President. Mr. President, seeing you here remind me of COP21 in Paris. There, the American and Pacific leadership rallied the world to produce the Paris Accords that we are now here in Glasgow to turn into action. Mr. President, thank you for making the trip to be with us in Glasgow. We all know that you are the son of a Pacific, and I need not remind you of the threat, excuse me, our region faces from a changing climate. Alongside the late, great Tony de Bruyn, and I understand great niece is here with us, you helped to deliver the Paris Accords that we are here to enact. That legacy of leadership is at stake here in Glasgow. And so is the very existence of Fiji's low-lying neighbors of Tuvalu, of Kiribati, and the Marshall Islands. We welcome the new commitments made last week, but with due respect, Mr. President, I can't feel any excitement for them because they are timid and inadequate. Several major players, of course, as you know, are missing in action, and others have shown up with insufficient commitments that have succeeded only in erecting speed bumps on the road that leads to the wrong side of 1.5 degrees of warming. Developed nations are failing us. They are the ones with the resources and the technology to make a difference. Yet, they have left the potential for clean energy and adaptation on the table by missing the $100 billion pledge 2 years running. Among others, the USA is woefully short of paying its fair share of climate finance. Now we, the most vulnerable, are told to suck it up and wait until 2023. There's no delay, Mr. President, to build resilience across Fiji's over 110 populated areas, islands. 13 cyclones have struck Fiji since we ratified the Paris Agreement. 13. And though our carbon emissions are negligible, we are embracing the opportunity of net zero and the good green jobs and energy independence it can create. But money matters, plain and simple. These changes require upfront investments we cannot always mount alone. We are doing all we can. Fiji is creating an entire economic sector that is dedicated to building climate resilience. Through a groundbreaking Climate Change Act, we have legally empowered ourselves to become net zero, harness nature-based solutions, fortify our infrastructure, and hold the private sector accountable, while also unlocking its innovative potential. That is all good. But we're also breaking ground in tragic ways we never wanted. Pacific nations have collectively agreed to a declaration to preserve the sovereignty of our waters, even if land masses are lost entirely. Fiji has a trust fund for relocation that finances the movement of communities and infrastructure to higher ground. And we have offered refuge to the people of Kiribati, Tuvalu, in the event their nations are lost to the rising seas. So, to answer your question, sir, no, I'm not excited. I'm not prepared, along with every Fijian, to do what is necessary to secure our future and ensure we can grow our island economy in a warmer world. We have solutions. We're developing more and we are always keen to share our experiences, just as we are keen to grow small island development state's share of access to finance. Thank you, sir.
And this is what our PM had to say at the Sustainable Innovation Forum, which convened alongside COP26.
Governments can deploy billions, they can unlock trillions. Our message to them is simple: work with us. Nations like Fiji are not only on the front line of climate impacts, we are also on the front line of systematic change. We face the type of urgency and imperative to act that have always been ingredients in the recipe for the great innovation. We are the laboratories of the future, and we are aggressively seeking opportunities to enlist the private sector, leverage additional resources, and drive expertise into solutions that can be scaled up to create global and generational good.
PM Frank Bainimarama also joined other world leaders to call on Australia's PM to show a concrete plan to halve its emissions by 2030. More after the break. Minister responsible for climate change, Eyas Said Kayum, urged world leaders to stop funding the sources of climate risk and start funding solutions.
Thank you very much, Chair, and good to meet you in person, actually. The first and most important way to mobilize finance for adaptation is to stop funding the sources of climate risks and start funding solutions. Mission critical at this COP is cutting carbon emissions to zero. The IMF reports that $11 million a minute are invested in subsidizing the fossil fuel industry. So the reality is that there is a relentless torrent of finance flowing in exactly the wrong direction. This is what we call market distortion, an arrangement that is consciously putting the brakes on transition. It is perpetuating industries that are not sustainable and therefore have no future, while at the same time putting our future at risk. Secondly, we need to deploy finance now because we know it will save costs down the track as the impacts of climate change mount. Investing now is an investment in the stability that all parties, both developed and developing, markets, corporations and financial institutions need to function effectively. We know the money is there. Right now, developed nations are spending trillions on defense partnerships and weapons of war, including new fleets of submarines, and subsidizing fossil fuels. We're only seeking billions, and everything we're asking is actually supported by science. Fiji has proposed a floor of no less than $750 billion per annum on aggregate beyond 2025 in order to unlock lasting solutions, while half of that finance dedicated to adaptation. And we need clarity in what the word mobilize means. It should not be in the form of punishing high interest loans and/or expensive consultant fees. It should be in the form of concessional arrangements, grants, responsible market mechanisms, and blended finance solutions. And there should be urgency in ensuring resources are positioned to cut through bureaucratic bloat to reach the communities that need them most, as we've heard previously. Vulnerable countries continue to hear big, bold, unprecedented financing commitments from parties, financial institutions, and indeed companies, and I've heard them here in Glasgow over the past few days. We actually welcome this shift in intent and promise for action. But the question remains, how will these commitments accelerate our capacity to adapt and at what cost? To those holding all the cards, we have one message. Climate financing effectiveness has clear performance indicators. 1, have solutions reach the most vulnerable. 2, are resources available to help countries access the technology and expertise needed to meet their development needs. We implore both developed countries and the world's corporate powers to use the opportunity of COP26 to improve the clarity of their commitments and recognize our inability to build resilience in a piecemeal fashion. We need to move from a project-based to a programmatic approach. Singular projects do not influence resilience, and unactioned studies and reports do not affect change. You can't build a house, one wall a decade, and expect it to serve as shelter. We need that shelter now. We are urging all leaders to make the investment and build now. This means mobilizing finance at an unprecedented scale now and making sure that finance is affordable, easily accessible, and fast deploying. Thank you.
He was also interviewed by CNN, where he echoed the concerns of the Prime Minister and also stated that if the world keeps its current trajectory, it will result in a death sentence for the island nations on the front lines of climate change.
There's a lot of noise has been made in the past 1 week or so. There's been a lot of positive noises being made. But it's now down to the crunch time where we are in the negotiating rooms to get the right text going forward. For us, as you know, as you highlighted through President Barack Obama, we need to keep 1.5 degrees alive. It's an existential issue for us. And the current trajectory suggests that, the global temperature will rise anywhere between 2.7 to 3.1 degrees by the end of the century. We cannot afford to do that. So I think the commitments need to be made, and we need to ensure that within the process we're able to monitor those commitments. We're still very positive about it. We believe that if we are able to push the envelope, we are able to also, I think, get some of the larger countries, the higher emitters, the corporations to see that there's actually merit in going for net zero emissions, because it actually makes a good argument for sustainability of profits, even sustainability of longevity in terms of your customer base. Well, I think if we keep on the current trajectory, it will be a death sentence, but we also believe that there's a solution, and the solution is that we need to cut emissions by 50% by 2030, in particular the high emitters, and then need to reach net zero emissions by 2050.
More after the break. Welcome back. Amidst all the discussions at COP26, one thing is very clear. The biggest carbon emitters need to step up and do their part and help mitigate climate change by making concrete commitments. All throughout the conference, our leaders, as well as leaders from around the world from other nations vulnerable to climate change, spoke out and negotiated with these countries to get them to keep their promises they made at earlier COPs. It would seem that these pleas did not fall entirely on deaf ears. On Wednesday, in a surprise move, the United States and China, who are the world's top two greenhouse gas emitting countries and together account for about 40% of the world's annual carbon output, announced that they've agreed to cooperate on limiting emissions to address the global climate crisis.
The United States and China are releasing a joint declaration which lays out how we will limit warming on this planet and how together we'll take action here at the COP, as well as in the years to come. President Biden had a conversation with President Xi a number of weeks ago in which both of the leaders expressed their hopes that despite areas of real difference, and we know there are, we could cooperate on the climate crisis. Now, the two largest economies in the world have agreed to work together to raise climate ambition in this decisive decade. Our presidents made it clear when they talked way back last February, I believe, that even while we had these differences, it was very important for us to focus on global crises. This is a climate crisis. It's perhaps one of the most compelling issues we face as a planet, if not the most. I would say it is the most right now. And I think that what we're doing is a responsible thing to do.
气候变化是全人类面临的共同挑战，关乎子孙后代的福祉。当前气候变化问题日趋严峻紧迫，已经从未来的挑战变成正在发生的危机。在气候变化领域，中美双方共识大于分歧，具有广泛的合作潜力。在离格拉斯哥大会结束还有2天，我们希望此份联合声明能够为大会的成功做出中美的贡献。
While only time will tell if these promises will be kept, This is an encouraging step in the right direction, and if we are to pull together and commit to change, it must come from a place of hope. I leave you with a message of hope from the English broadcaster, natural historian and author Sir David Attenborough at COP26. Good night, take care, and I will see you next week.
A new industrial revolution powered by millions of sustainable innovations is essential and is indeed already beginning. We will all share in the benefits: affordable clean energy, healthy air, and enough food to sustain us all. Nature is a key ally. Wherever we restore the wild, it will recapture carbon and help us bring back balance to our planet. And as we work to build a better world, we must acknowledge no nation has completed its development because no advanced nation is yet sustainable. All have a journey still to compete, so that all nations have a good standard of living and a modest footprint. We're going to have to learn together how to achieve this, ensuring none are left behind. We must use this opportunity to create a more equal world, and our motivation should not be fear, but hope.
Can we fix climate problem in one generation? My answer would be yes, we have to.
We need to not just to talk about what we can do, but to do what we can.
This is a challenge that we should try to solve in a quick way with a long-term vision.
It comes down to this: the people alive now or the generation to come will look at this conference and consider one thing. Did that number stop rising and start to drop as a result of commitments made here? There's every reason to believe that the answer can be yes. If working apart, we are force powerful enough to destabilize our planet, surely working together, we are powerful enough to save it. In my lifetime, I've witnessed a terrible decline. In yours, you could and should witness a wonderful recovery. That desperate hope, ladies and gentlemen, delegates, excellency, is why the world is looking to you and why you are here. Thank you.